Hello, everybody, and welcome to IndieQuest, the celebration of the indie and obscure. Your home for all things indie game discussion topics. We love talking about indie games. I'm one of your co-hosts today, Josh, and I'm joined by one of my wonderful co-hosts, Steve. How are you today?
Doing good. It was a busy week between our last recording and this one, but I'm a happily married man and doing well otherwise. So thanks for asking.
Well, congrats. I wasn't able to be there, but I saw all the pictures and seen so much handsomeness in the photos with you guys together that it's a little overwhelming. You know, I got a little like sweaty. I had to wipe my brow looking at the picture. It's just yeah. Anyway, I'm joined by my other host here, Captain Drachma. How are you?
I'm also doing well, and I'll be completely honest. A lot of those pictures were helped by the silver-haired fox, Ross. I mean, any picture Ross is in just really brings out the handsome. Rusty was there bringing the handsome. Yeah. Of course, Trav was there bringing the handsome as well. So certainly handsome overload with some of those individuals. And then there's me and Steve there to kind of, bring in the average. Get it to the old mean, I like to say.
Yeah. Leah and I sat down, and when we were, filling out our guest list, we were like, all right, we can only invite 8 out of 10s or higher. Right? Because we need every photo to look like a stock photo. We need everyone to look at these photos and think, holy crap, what a beautiful bunch of people right there. And I think we did a pretty good job. We didn't let anyone sneak in that didn't meet the criteria.
There was one specific picture that I've looked at a few times because it makes me chuckle, of all 5 of who I would call the Discord /podcast /bro folk, right? So myself, Ross, Rusty, Blake, and Trav, right? So we're all in a picture, and Trav is in the middle of it. And obviously nobody can see this picture, but it is just, it's almost like we're all there to take a picture with Trav. Trav's got his arms folded in the middle, just looking like the coolest dude. And we're all just like kind of smiling, hugging as close as we can to Trav. It's the funniest picture when you look at it from that perspective. It's just like Trav is there. He's obviously the center of attention. It's not Steve's wedding.
We wanted to celebrate his big day, He just had a nice long flight over 3 hours. That's not easy.
He did.
So my man needs to get his props. But yeah, it was a great time. Wedding went off without a hitch. Very fun reception. And now it's just indie video games. No more distractions. All right. Nothing left to get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I had COVID, and I was like, well, this sucks. The last time, and I was a big baby. It didn't come on, but I'm here this time, obviously. So, past everything. Yeah, we're finally going to be talking about Bastion today. I mean, that's always fun, right?
It is fun. And honestly, Josh, I wonder how long that episode would have been with you on it. It was already an hour and 40 minutes because of our spoil. Like, it would have been easily 2 hours, probably the longest episode of IndieQuest ever had you been on, so... Yeah, maybe not the absolute worst to miss.
Yeah, I was listening along like at work, and I was like, I had so much to say that I could have interjected with because I loved Animal Well too. It's a great game. So, like, I agree with everything you guys said about that game. And then I was like, yeah, I would like to talk about this or this, but you know what? We'll move past that this time because if we start talking Animal Well, we will not stop. So,
right.
Yeah,
it's true. It's a good episode when the spoiler section is the runtime of your average IndieQuest.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, want to just jump right into our SuperGiant game retrospective, or at least the first one of them here? Who wants to bring us in with some info about Bastion and SuperGiant games?
I can lead us in a little bit. I can give you some of the stats that I know I have, and then read just kind of a quick description of the studio sourced from a secret source that you won't find anywhere else. All right. But yes. So Bastion is the first game developed by SuperGiant. I think at the time that the game came out, which was, fun fact, July 20th, 2011, that wasn't really a name that a lot of people were like particularly aware of. But now these days, at the point in time where we're looking back on this game, obviously SuperGiant is sort of like a mega studio in the indie game space. I think it wouldn't be a far stretch to argue that it's like maybe the largest indie studio by like public mind share at the very least. Like it's triple I when you think of that sort of acronym. SuperGiant is very much the first thing that comes to mind. Something I had forgotten. It was published by Warner Bros. Interactive, which felt a little random to me. But yes, in general, Supergiant, my memory of it is, so according to our super secret source, it was formed by Amir Rao and Gavin Simone in 2009, those are folks that had come out of Electronic Arts. So they'd been working on stuff like Command and Conquer. And as is kind of a fairly common story, I think actually Animal Well is somewhat similar, which we just mentioned. They said, I want to do my own thing. They broke off. And they sort of built a lean but very powerful team. So artist Gen Z, composer Darren Korb. And I think the reason I first heard about the game was they brought on Greg Kasavin to do writing and like build out the narrative. And Greg Kasavin, up to that point, had been a game journalist and a reviewer for GameSpot. And this was like one of the first examples that I remember ever hearing about of a journalist switching over onto the development side. And I think maybe some people had heard about this game as a result of Greg's involvement, or at the very least, that is sort of what like roughly put it out on my radar. So that's where the game came from. My personal experience was that it came out as part of the, Summer of Arcade on Xbox 360. And I was kind of tracking all those games as they came out. I was really hyped on Xbox 360 launches during Summer of Arcade. So I was there day and date, kind of ready to play it when it first came out. So this was my first revisit in over a decade. But what about you boys? What's your history with Bastion, if any?
I played Bastion. I think Bastion was one of the very first games that I downloaded for my Switch when I got it. So probably, we did not get the Switch at launch, so probably around 2018, 2019, which I think it was ported to the Switch in 2018. So can't be any earlier than 2018. But around there, I have this memory of thinking about Bastion along with the Discord, and I joined the Discord in 2020. So it might have been around that time. I don't know if I beat tweeted it. I don't even know if I had a Twitter back then. But I think I mentioned Bastion in the very early days of my Polykill Discord membership. So I've played it probably at least 4 years ago. What about you, Josh?
All right.
I tried it out when it was part of Humble Indie Bundle number 5. I was looking that up while you guys were talking here. Guess what games were in there? I'll just list them out. We got Amnesia, The Dark Descent, Psychonauts,
oh my God,
Limbo, Super Brothers EP, Bastion, Lone Survivor, Braid, and Super Meat Boy. Isn't that just like the most banger list of games?
There's literally not a miss in that entire list. Holy crap. That's like every big indie in of that era, in the last couple of years as of the time that it released. Man, those early Humble Bundles were something else. I remember hopping on every single one of those as they came out.
Yeah, so I've heard about it like on Giant Bombcast, like I don't know what other podcasts I was listening to back then, maybe like Video Game Apocalypse or something. Like, these podcasts are still around, but they were like few and far between back then. I had heard about the game, got the bundle, and I played like the intro, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go back to that, and I never did. So this was my first actual like playthrough of the game and like experiencing the whole thing. And then this is after playing Hades and other Supergiant games, and there's like a lot of things you could see that are obvious through lines for those games that we could talk about. But yeah, I enjoyed my time with it. I do think that there are elements to it that feel like everybody took an inspiration from, obviously, and it's not as good as some of the things that have taken the inspiration from the game, but I had a great time with it, so we can dive deep into more of my feelings on it. But yeah, this was my first full experience with the game.
Do you guys just want to start going into some of the categories? Start talking different groupings of how we break this game down? Yeah,
Bastion it up.
So, I think one of the standout things, I assume, especially in 2011, but even revisiting it, is the way this game looks. It's got a very hand-drawn, painted look, kind of a top-down 3/4 view, I guess. You're not straight top-down, of course. You're kind of doing that thing that like Zelda games do, right? Where, if they shifted, it wouldn't look right, but you're kind of like looking over top of your character's head, but still walking forward on a 2D plane. That's the whole thing. The big thing that's really cool about how this game comes together is how the game builds as you walk. So at the very beginning of the game, your character, the kid, is laying in bed and you wake up. And as you start moving, it doesn't look like you can move anywhere. You're just on this island of land in the middle of nothing. But as you start moving towards what seems like an exit, blocks start building in front of you. They start building the path, which honestly, I don't know. There are games that have done this, of course, but I don't know that there's a game that I can think of that has done it quite like Bastion. I almost feel like it's a Bastion calling card in a way. It's so Bastion. So, I mean, this game looks fantastic. In my opinion, even 13 years after release, still looks. I would say there's two sides to this coin. It definitely looks like Bastion could have come out in 2011, but also that doesn't mean it doesn't look awesome, because it does.
It has a very unique style to it. I think that honestly, if you can look at like every SuperGiant game and almost be like, they have like a style that kind of follows from Bastion throughout even the newer games that they've been putting out. Like you said, it has a look that looks like almost unlike any other game. Most games that have like a dungeon element or like stuff where you have to like, you're rolling around, you can see like the entire world. Here you kind of have to piece it together as you're playing, which is nice. It's a different take on the genre for sure. So
yeah, so I played it on Vita for this particular replay, and it looked great on like the small screen and the OLED of the Vita and stuff like that. Something that was like kind of impressive, which sort of is half into how it looks, but also into how it plays, is that even though the levels are building in front of you as you walk, you're never uncertain about where to go, or almost never uncertain about where to go. Sometimes they're playful with it and they like, hide a little secret path if you go poking at the edge of the screen there. But there still is like enough in front of you and sort of enough leading, like suggestive landmarks or the way that the rock outcroppings sort of build up always sort of guide you down the corridor that you need to go down to pretty naturally, which I think is pretty nice. It's interesting to me that you can like outrace it, like as it's building. If you're like really rushing things, you're just rolling, you'll cruise right off the edge and take some damage. Which is fun because it's not just like strictly tied to like a radius around your characters and things like that. But yeah, very distinct. I think that there's probably two component elements, two building blocks of Bastion that everybody remembers, and one of them is, I guess, the building blocks.
Yep.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the narrator, obviously. I feel like that helps if you're like, do get a little bit lost. You're like in a corner, like, where do I go? He's like, and the kid couldn't find the gate. And then you'll be like, oh, there's a gate right there. He'll actually tell you like straight up, like, okay, you're going the wrong way sometimes too. So, yeah.
The best line. So we're going to talk about the narrator, I suppose, now, right? We're here. And that's the other key feature, I suppose, of Bastion. The narrator talks over everything you do in this game, so almost everything. But there's a line of dialogue. No matter what thing you decide to do next, the narrator has something to say. It goes so far as to, depending on what weapon loadout, we're going to get into all the weapons later, but depending on what weapon loadout you choose, the narrator will comment on the combo of weapons, which I think is fantastic because technically the combination, they aren't endless. There's not endless amount of weapons, but there's a lot of combinations. So the amount of voice dialogue that has gone into this game that a lot of people will never hear ever. Even if you do 16 playthroughs of this game, there's stuff in there that you won't get to hear, right? So that is awesome. And then there's things where if you're just screwing around, one of the I think a lot of times people will call back on this line specifically. At the very beginning of the game, you get your hammer and you're kind of walking around and you just you go off to the side and you start breaking up boxes. And the narrator, instead of advancing, the narrator will be like, oh, the kid decided to smash some stuff or something like that, something along those lines. And he will just say like, oh, whatever you're doing at that moment, he has a line for it. And it's one of the reasons that this game is utterly unique even today, because there's not a whole lot of games. And if any games out there do this now, everybody's going to be like, well, that's very Bastion of that game, right? So very, very interesting way to tell a story and to explain what's happening in game.
Yeah, this is the first and maybe the most obvious of what will become a recurring statement from me, or I imagine from all of us, but this is the first seed of Hades that you see in Bastion, right? I mean, right down to the fact that Logan Cunningham, the narrator, has narrated across all of SuperGiant's games, including Hades, and Hades has that same sort of very situational, contextual type of narration. I would imagine the other ones do. As just frame of reference for people, the reason that I personally will keep calling on Hades as my touch point, not only is it the most popular of their games and the one that I've played most recently, but I actually have not played Pyre or Transistor, the two that exist in between this.
Yep, neither have I.
Which will be fun for when we get to those here in this little mini series that we're doing. So all I really have is Hades to compare this stuff to. But yeah, I appreciate in Bastion how the narrator sometimes will sort of call your shot and then switch up the line when you don't do what was anticipated. So it'll be early in the game or something, oh, and then the kid woke up, and if you just chill there, he's like, oh, maybe he's still napped for a or they'll call attention to things that you're doing that you might have idly been doing just because you're in video game playing mode and not even thinking about it. So another early one is you go into this abandoned rundown bar, and there's the statue sort of stone version of what used to be the bartender, and without even thinking about it, you're just smashing crates, you're smashing enemy, you're smashing debris, you just smash the statue, and he'll say something along the lines of he had no love lost for bartender McDonald. And you're like, oh, I didn't realize that I kind of just killed a guy. So all right, so it is very fun to just kind of always be surprised and a little bit delighted, and it doesn't hurt certainly that the actual voice acting is so good and just so satisfying to listen to. The dude's got an incredible voice.
Seriously.
And so it makes the whole thing fun.
So you want to talk a little bit about how the gameplay works and what the point of the game really is? You're the kid and you're building this Bastion, the titular Bastion, which is supposedly to cure the world or, quote, fix everything after this unknown calamity that's occurred. So basically you're going to different worlds and picking up these shards to make Bastion more whole again to hopefully fix this horrible situation. So pretty much you have the hub world, which is Bastion, and then you go off on these glider pads, and then you go to little stages that are around 10 to 15 minutes apiece, and then usually sometimes there's a boss, sometimes there's a not, sometimes there's a puzzle to solve, and you get the little shards, and then you're building up Bastion. So that's pretty much the main loop of the actual gameplay of, you have weapons you unlock, and we can talk about our favorite weapon builds and things like that too if you guys want to.
I absolutely do want to, maybe shortly after we talk, I guess, about Bastion. So the Bastion itself, yes, you build it, but there are shops in the Bastion, right, that are useful to your gameplay, your playthrough, I suppose. So the different shops include a weapon shop where you can change out your weapon loadout and a special ability that either weapon has, or you can get other abilities that don't involve your weapons. You can, in Bastion, something we didn't mention, it is very much an action hack and slash top-down adventure type game, but there are quite a few of RPG elements where you can actually level. So you're getting experience the entire time you're playing, and when you do level, you increase health and things like that, but you also unlock these slots that you can attach these items. I can't remember exactly what they're called, relics, I think, maybe. that you can.
I think they're booze. They're like alcohol because you set them in the distillery.
Oh, right. Yeah. So you can actually equip those, and they do different things. Like, oh, if you're at full health, you have a higher critical hit chance. Or if you're under 33% health, you have a higher critical hit chance. Or there's you can have 5 health tonics instead of 3, or 5, I think black tonics or something like that, the things that you can use your special moves for instead of 3. So there's all kinds of different stuff that you can equip as you level, and of course you unlock one with each level. I don't know about you guys, I finished the game I think at like level 6, and I think maximum level is level 10, so you certainly don't have to. It's not a grind heavy game, I don't think, right? You're not going to be tortured if you don't do grind against enemies, go back to areas and get as many levels as possible. Some of the other shops include buying different stuff, including those the booze, like Steve was mentioning. You can get things that can upgrade your weapons. You can get idols, which Steve was referencing Hades. Idols are very much like heat in Hades, where if you equip them, they basically give you a debuff in a way. So one that I had equipped the entire game was every time an enemy dies, they drop a bomb. And so basically you just don't want to be next to that enemy when it goes down, or else you'll get injured, which I often forgot about, even though I had it on, like I said, almost all game. So I got injured a lot by it. But the nice thing about them is, yes, it makes the game more challenging, which it's not an overly difficult game anyway, but it also gives you more experience and more currency to buy the things that we've been talking about in these shops, right? So Bastion building, very important, and I would say one piece of the 2 parts that make this game play up, right?
Yeah, and when you're talking about building the Bastion, so it is in this very level-based structure, right? You launch from the Bastion, you literally pick your level from like an overworld map, and when you finish it and you get this shard or whatever that you're going to put back into the Bastion, you can choose which of these buildings that you want to actually build, or later in the game upgrade so that they have like added effects or better effects, things like that. And so, even though the whole game itself is not crazy long, it's probably like a 6-hour game or something top to bottom, there is some customization in how you choose to play. You can say, oh, I want to focus on, making sure that I can swap out my weapons to the weapons that I prefer early, rather than just being dependent on the weapons that you find in every level, because you tend to find one new weapon in every level. Or there's throughout the different levels, one of the things that you'll be kind of poking around and finding, one of the only really optional things in these levels is you'll find usually upgrade materials for your different weapons, but sometimes like trinkets and things like that. And maybe you are worried about the ones that you're missing, or you don't want to like scour every inch of the level. Well, you can build a lost and found shop where you can, with the in-game currency, buy the items that you didn't find when you went through these levels, which is actually kind of important because you can't replay levels outside of a score attack mode, which is only unlocks after you finish the game. During your main playthrough, it's like once you're through it, you're through it. So you're like, well, I want to make sure I get all those upgrade materials, so you might focus on building a lost and found first. And then later when you upgrade them too, it's interesting to see what the different effects are that you might find. I think a lot of people will probably upgrade like the armory or the forge or whatever it's called, so you can upgrade your weapons to a higher level. Like that'll be one of the earlier things they do. But, there is a little bit of variety in that way in how you choose to go about the game. The game has a lot of variety just in general, right? There's a good variety of weapons. There's like 12 weapons or something like that. You can bring 2 of them. You choose the order that you can build out the buildings and things like that. You choose what weapons you use as your primary and secondary. And so you can sort of tailor it to how you personally want to play.
Yeah, I think that I think that the freedom of like just kind of experimenting with the weapons, especially since, like you said, you get them almost every stage. So you usually will have an opportunity to at least try the weapon out a little bit. It's like, oh, I kind of like how this one's working for me. Like, oh, I like how this one attacks, or I like the range on this one, or whatever. And then you can kind of go into the system and be like, all right, maybe I'll try these 2 paired together, because you kind of have like almost like a primary weapon, quote unquote, and a secondary weapon, I would call it, or however you want to use it. And yeah, I feel like it's nice to have like a to me, I liked having like an up close, really fast weapon and maybe something ranged. So if I could find like two things like that to kind of address all enemies at all distance, that's how kind of how I played the game. But hey, maybe somebody just wants to go in and just shoot people with all the two different guns in the game because, you know, it has guns and things like that. Or, you know, they want to do like a Gatling gun type thing or the dueling pistols or whatever. It really just depends on your type of vibe when you're playing. And I mean, this game, I mean, it's no spoilers or anything, but this game encourages multiple playthroughs. So you could come back in the game a second playthrough and try out a completely different build if you'd like to.
That does have me interested, Josh, since you went over the weapons. Do you remember which two you used most often, or were you cycling? It's your first playthrough, so were you cycling through a lot, or were you did you vibe with a couple specifically?
I really like the war machete because it's like super fast and like really fast up close, and then I like the upgrades on it. Like they give you extra, and then you could throw it as well, so it has kind of like that the combo of throwing and like really nice up and close. I ended up going back to that one the most, but besides that weapon, I kind of just mixed it up, that weapon and then a special, and then whatever other weapon I was kind of feeling for that stage. So I was kind of just feeling them out, which is always fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, War Machete honestly reminds me a lot of the sword in Hades. It has a similar.
It is. It kind of is. Yeah.
I played Bastion before I played Hades, so I would be, you know, once we get to, you know, more verdict stuff, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say, Josh, since you're the only one here that played Hades first, right? But right. I can't remember exactly what my loadout was the first time I played. I think I went dueling pistols. And I think it was like dueling pistols and scrap musket. Dueling pistols is more of a ranged, fast weapon, and then scrap musket's a shotgun, I believe, if I remember correctly.
It is.
So that, and they're both technically ranged weapons, but one I just used as melee, and then one I used as ranged. This time, for the majority of the playthrough, I went with Breaker's Bow and the Brusher's Pike. So Breaker's Bow I used from the second I got it, and I decided I'm just going to do a bow run, and I leveled up the bow and used the bow. And honestly, there were probably, I would get other ranged weapons and be like, yeah, this is definitely stronger than my bow. But the precision of the bow was very fun for me. You could kind of snipe people from a long ways away, especially those super annoying either plants that shoot stuff at you constantly, or the dragon statues are super annoying sometimes, and the bow kind of just completely removes them, especially if you get the damage over time buff that you can get when you level it up. So, but then eventually I actually got the flame bellows, and I know I did not use the flame bellows at all in my last playthrough, and I basically just build a damage over time build. Everything I ever hit was taking damage constantly. So
nice.
It was very fun. I enjoyed myself with the build that I had this time. What about you, Steve?
Yeah. I swapped between 3 primary weapons the whole time. First was the Brusher's Pike is sort of like my sort of go-to default. So it's like a spear, right? It's probably your longest range melee weapon. So you still can get a little bit of spacing, a little bit of distancing from folks. Again, it plays similar to the spear.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my go-to, especially once you upgrade it later on, because it gains an ability that lets it damage through armor. So there's a lot of enemies in the game, especially later in the game, where like if you attack them from the front, you don't do any damage at all.
Yeah, that damn
so you have to like kind of
frog
hopping thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
All right, I switched between 3 different weapons primarily. I really favored 2, but there were times where I used 3 sort of on rotation. For my melee weapon, I used the pike pretty much exclusively, and it's because, 1, it has the best spacing. Like, it's, of the melee weapons, it's the longest ranged melee weapon, for whatever that means. And later on, you get an upgrade for it that lets you damage through armored enemies. So there are enemies in the game where when you attack them, usually from the front, they won't take any damage. So you have to like bait them to jump over you, or you have to get around them and attack them from the back. And when you have a fully upgraded spear, which won't happen until pretty late in the game, you're able to just stand in front of them and just unload on them, which takes away some of the more obnoxious enemies. The second weapon that I used pretty much all the time is the mortar.
Yeah.
So you get a mortar that lets you stand stationary and you can charge up an attack, and the longer you hold the button, it will launch an explosive shell further away from you. And at least by my estimation, it sure seems like the strongest weapon in the game in terms of like individual impact damage. It's slow, but with some upgrades, you can speed it up a little bit, and you're ultimately able to like use it kind of similar to how you used the bow, Drachma, where it's like you can take down all the like annoying turrets and stuff that are way on the outside of the arena, and then I would use the spear to kind of clean everything else up, all the little guys and things like that.
I love the mortar. The only thing, like you said, it's slow. I felt like the bow is a little bit more versatile because you can move around a little bit more. As soon as you start mortaring, you have cement shoes on and you're stuck. So if you have, if you didn't plan out well and you have any enemies around you, you're probably going to take damage. So it's very much a glass cannon, which makes sense, right? You're able to do a whole bunch of damage, but then you can also take a bunch of damage in return. And then regarding your the pike, which I also used, the flame bellows I already mentioned, but it does the same thing where it just ignores all shields forever. And so the frogs, where they were such a terrible enemy early game, as soon as you get something like that, they become basically the easiest thing that you can fight because you can take them out in like one of their hops and they're done. So
yeah, they're over, and then you get some pretty decent like experience and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the last one that I used was the flame bellows. I'd say I used the mortar and flame bellows the most because, like you mentioned, you can set it up to be kind of a damage over time machine. And you can also set it so that when enemies are on fire, they're slowed down, which means that I could usually like space better with the mortar. And you couple that, now we're just getting into like hyper-specific builds here, but like you couple that with the leech aid, which is one of the tonics that lets you gain a little bit of health back on damage to enemies. That also works on the damage over time. So you can just run in. I would sweep a big wide spread of flame. I'd dot like 4 enemies. I'd go back and my health would just go just fill all the way up, and I'd mortar everything down. It was so satisfying, and I was pretty much indestructible. So it was fun. Who knows what I used the first time I played it. I can barely remember my own name 13 years ago rather than what weapons I used in Bastion 13 years ago, but that was a very satisfying build this time. And it's pretty powerful because I ended up having to do to kind of like go on a little bit of a side tangent here. I ended up playing through the game twice. I did the score attack mode afterwards, mostly because I was doing some trophy hunting, as we do.
Did you get the? My question is, did you get the platinum? I
did get the platinum. I got it about an hour before we started recording.
Nice.
And the big kind of difficulty there is there are unlockable sort of like bonus arenas that you get as you go through the game. There's 4 of them in total. And it's just sort of like waves of enemies, 15, 20, 30 in the most extreme case, rounds of enemies. And you just have to defeat all of them, and then you get a bunch of the currency of the game and some experience in the game too. But there are trophies tied to each of those 4, having to beat them with all 10 of the idols turned on. Yeah. Oh, which is so ridiculous in some cases.
Yeah, I imagine.
And some of the I almost gave up on the platinum because again, these are like 30 wave rounds. Okay. So like one attempt is like a half an hour, and you get to like the very last couple of waves, and it's just a bunch of the ridiculously hard, like fast human enemies that like poison you and like zoom towards you and hit you with melee really fast. And of course, there's idols that mean that they slow you down when they attack you and all sorts of stuff. So it was like I lost a couple of runs in one of those, and I was like, I don't know that I have many more attempts at this in me, but I was able to just barely squeak out a victorious run on one of them. And I would say largely that was due to the flame bellows, because sometimes I would have to like strategically, it's the only time in the game playing it that I ever had to do this. I would strategically leave enemies alive just to heal over time off of
yeah.
them. So I would get down to one enemy and I would like hit him with my flame dot. So I would start ticking my health back up, and then I would just dodge away and let my health slowly tick. And then I'd run towards him and I hit him with one little flame of fire. I'd dodge away, let him fill my health back up again. So yeah, very, very fun build if you're looking to be a little bit overpowered.
I imagine that was a satisfying platinum, Steve, because not only is it seemingly a pretty tough platinum, just based on what you said, but also a 13-year-old game at this point, right? So it had to have felt pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, good to go back and fully clean it up.
Yeah, you got to get like all the trials like fully maxed out to get all three
weapons
items. 3 items for all the weapon trials.
You do, yeah. So
okay.
Something we didn't mention before is in between the main levels as you go through, you will also unlock these individual weapon trials, one for every weapon that you find. And they're just like small little puzzles or arenas set up to kind of like test your both like ability and knowledge of a particular weapon. And so there's a wide variety of conditions that you'll do. It'll be like, destroy as many enemies as you can in this time limit, or it'll be like, protect these statues from enemies that are coming towards it, or like kill all these enemies in as few arrow shots as possible. Just a big range of conditions. And then the better you do on those, you'll unlock either 1, 2, or 3 rewards. And the rewards are pretty much always a couple of upgrade materials, one for the weapon you're trialing, one for another one. And then you'll also unlock, if you do the best on that particular trial, like a powerful, unique, special skill that you can use for that. And yeah, for the platinum, you have to do all... you have to perfect all those. Honestly, there's not actually like a trophy for doing all those, but one of the trophies is for maxing every upgrade on every weapon.
Right.
And the game is set up in such a way where there is exactly enough upgrade materials to do that for every weapon. So you have to get all the upgrade materials from everywhere that you can.
Well, I figure we can pivot a little bit and talk about the story, just the overview and like how you guys feel about the story here. I mean, I thought it was great. I thought it was told well, like we were talking about with the narrator, and I feel like there are things in the story that I really, really enjoyed. I guess it's kind of hard not to talk spoilers, right? Because it's pretty easy to be like, oh yeah, this happens, So I don't know how much we can actually discuss on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're planning on doing a little, probably miniature spoiler talk after our verdict here, but I will say that regardless of how good the story is, it's well worth going through. And also, we've already mentioned this, but the story is told in such a unique and good, fun way that I think, honestly, the story could be kind of trash, but the narrator speaking or talking about it the entire time in the way he does is so good that I'm just smiling the whole time anyway, right? But the story is still good, I would say.
Yeah. This is where maybe I'll differ with you guys a little bit. I kind of agree with you that the story is good. I would say it's good, not great.
Yeah.
To me, I think the story itself is sort of serviceable. It's got like one or two like little interesting turns or events, things like that. But I think the story is good. It feels maybe like more interesting than it actually is because it's delivered in a very interesting way.
Right.
Again, it's like an average book with the best audiobook narrator that you've ever listened to. So you hop on Audible and you're like, damn, that was really good.
Exactly.
Right. That's true. I mean, really what you're doing is chasing a bunch of MacGuffins, right? The whole game, if you think about it, right? So
yeah, the whole game is very structured in that way, right? Like it is very routine. It is very predictable. Constantly that you're going to be going in and just sort of like, I'm going to hop into this level. I'm going to get to the end. I'm going to get the MacGuffin. I'm going to hop out, do my upgrades, hop in, do the next one. And there's maybe reserved for our mini spoiler chat, but there's more that I have to say on that particular topic too.
There might not be a more linear game that exists than Bastion. I mean, there's maybe a couple times where within the main story itself that you can select from 2 different stages. Otherwise, you can pick to go do trials for your weapons. You can choose to do the wave and the waves of enemies like Steve was mentioning, or continue on. Like, that's it. That's all there is to do. You can go into the shops. So, Josh mentioned earlier about replayability. I do feel like Bastion has good replayability in terms of trying different weapon builds, but the story sections or like the actual game itself is going to be all the same for the most part. There's a couple different choices you can make that are different, but otherwise it's very, you're walking down a hallway for this entire game. So
it's a very pretty hallway, though. Well,
it is. It's a beautiful.
And it is a very pretty hallway. No denying that.
Yeah, and it has. I mean, we can all agree that we got that awesome Darren Korb soundtrack. That's just like always blasting. And it's always amazing. So that's to be expected from these games, right?
It is absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite songs that I've ever brought to an IQ OST is Slinger's song. And as soon as that song is for the dueling pistols, that's when you get the dueling pistols, that song comes on. And just such a, like, the strings, such a cool, like, Western, you can almost see the tumbleweed going down, like blowing in the wind during that song. Yeah, every piece of music in this game is just so good. It's kind of a mix of Western and rock in a lot of ways. It's classic Darren Korb, now that we've listened to so much more of his stuff, right?
Yeah.
But there's a reason that in the indie sphere, Darren Korb is like the king of music. He's so good. And yeah, you just got to go back and play Bastion and to find out where his roots lie, at least in video games. And God, he's so good.
Yeah, soundtrack might be one of the best parts of the whole game. It is so good. And again, another one of the parts where I was really surprised. I was like, oh, wow, like Hades and Bastion are a lot more similar in a lot of ways than I realized. You listen to the soundtrack and yeah, there's more of a Western flair to some of the tracks and stuff like that. But I'm like, oh yeah, this is some Hades ass music right here. Like my guys got a house style and they're doing good.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I did do one other thing that we can talk about here is I shot out a message to the Discord. I was like, hey, if you played Bastion and you have any thoughts, reply to this message and we'll read it on the show. So we have a few here. Who wants to read the first one from Burger Champ here?
I'll take this one away. This is the absolute most Burger Champ comment ever. But in regards to Bastion, Burger Champ says, he's the most annoying part of Neverending Story, and becoming the bully to those that bully you is a bad message that promotes a cycle of violence. And then had an assist from our buddy Ross saying, damn it, Burger, you beat me to it. So Burger's literally just talking about a character from Neverending Story named Bastion. Thank you, Burger. I'm 100% positive that Burger has probably played Bastion too. So he could have actually
most
weighed
likely.
For sure, yes. I'll read the next one, and with a promise to listeners that there are actual commentaries on Bastion coming, but this one is also not one of them. We have one from our buddy Mook, who just says, I hope to play it one day. No time like the present, Mook.
Yeah,
all right, get in there.
We got one from Slater that says, I'm replaying it now. It's fine, but the combat isn't enjoyable enough for me to do any extra challenges or test the idols. So they're not really enjoying the combat in the game. So I disagree. I think the combat's pretty fun, but hey.
Yeah. Where do you both fall in terms of the combat? We didn't really dig too deep into your personal feelings on it. I'd be curious to hear this.
It might come out a little bit in Verdict too, but combat I think is a little bit of a weak point. I feel like it feels a little tech demo-y for Hades to me. It's
a little simple.
It's very precursor to Hades. Like it feels like I'm playing Hades, but just not quite, right? Like,
but without the tremendous variety that Hades offers.
Yes. Different setting, and I agree with that. I think that it's, like you said, it's a little basic and simple, but like it's not a bad game.
No,
like I had fun playing it. Yeah, it plays smooth, but there's not much more than like you said, the weapon variety. But like really, when it comes down to it, it's a very simple game, even with and it's not even that hard of a game, even with the added buffs you can do or debuffs you can have. It's not even that hard with those on. So yeah, it's very simple, but it's not horrible. by any means. It plays pretty smooth.
Oh
Yeah.
I certainly don't want anyone to think that my takeaway on it is that it's horrible, but
Yeah.
I would generally agree. It's on the straightforward side. You are going to be constantly dodge rolling, and when you're not dodge rolling, you're going to be smashing one of the attack buttons, and the weapons are different, but they're also like you're going to be either smashing an attack button or you're going to be charging up a shot, and then you're going to be dodge rolling away, and it doesn't vary too much beyond that. I would say for folks that have never played Bastion but have played Hades, imagine playing Hades, but you don't find any boons that change your build as you go along, and you just have your starting attacks the entire run, and that would be Bastion's combat.
I will actually go one step further and compare it to a game that isn't a game in SuperGiant's catalog. So Hades...
It is definitely better than Death's Door.
He knew what I was going to say. It's not fair. It's not fair.
No.
Death's Door... I mean, seriously, that's literally what I was going to say, Steve. Death's Door's combat is honestly very similar to Bastion. But Death's Door's combat is just... And you can agree or disagree with me here, Josh, because you recently played it too, but it feels very similar. It does a lot of the same things. It's got a similar view to it, but it's just so much more crisp. And
yeah, I think there's just like, and I mean, this game is very polished. Don't get me wrong. Bastion, for like their first game, it's a very polished game for what it is and for when it came out. But like Death's Door just has like, take that polish and keep buffing that polish like 10 times more, 15 times more, like, yeah. So I agree with that. It is a simple game when you break it down, for sure, too. Yeah.
Right. I feel like it's almost a little unfair to compare it to Hades because they are, at their core, technically kind of different games, right? So in a lot of ways, like it's more of the action-adventure style to Death's Door. But still, even comparing it, to that apples to apples, it falls very short, but also is 10 years older. So it paved the way for a lot of these games. Anyway, now that we've talked about combat, I will read a comment from myself and Josh's friend, Pam. It's still my favorite of the SuperGiant games. It's amazing how they nailed their style, the art, music, and voice acting in their very first game. And I know that this is one of Pam's favorites. Like she says, but she's often mentioned Bastion, talks about how much she loves the music, and I remember her saying that she likes it more than Hades, which, hey, I know that there's probably plenty of people out there like that. It's personally not my opinion, but I know there's a lot of people that feel that way. And so, yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sympathetic to people that do like this one more, of course, because the roguelike is not for everybody.
That's true.
I'll read this last one here because it's the longest one we have. From our buddy, Potomax. Hey, you all listened to the Potomax episode, right? One of our best.
Mm-hmm.
Says, I had the game for years in my Humble Bundle catalog and finally played it. Editor's note, Josh, that's probably thanks to Humble Bundle 5. I think
yeah, definitely.
Goes on to say, I'm a bit conflicted. The gameplay was fun, but it didn't really have incentives to change weapons or specials. I just kept using what worked. Story was confusing for me. The narration was cool, but a bit tough to follow. And the end game choices felt tacked on. It felt a bit artificial to pad replays. Quote, you now have to beat the game 3 more times to see every ending. Second editor's note, you actually only have to beat it twice to see every ending, but point taken, Potomax. Says, and the make the game more difficult for yourself thing with the idols is really not my thing. I prefer just playing the intended difficulty. Says, but I'm mostly nitpicking. I had a good time. Music, visuals, and gameplay are tight, and that's the most important thing anyway. So, I think... Of any of these, I think I probably align up with Potomax's feelings in general. But yeah, I think that's well said.
Yeah, honestly, I think I also do. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I was going to say, I think we're all probably somewhere in that zone that he's in right here, where it's like, yeah, it's a great game, but there's a couple of things we can nitpick in here. But I guess maybe we can go around the table here and place that on the quest log if you guys are ready for that whole all fun thing, and we can come to a consensus here, because this is one of those. It's one of those ones where if it's not on the main quest, we might get some guff for. So what do you guys think? Who wants to go first here on this one?
I'll just mention a couple of cons, which I already mentioned one of them. I felt like the combat is a little stiff in comparison to some of its contemporaries. But the other thing that annoys me, and I don't know how better that they could do this, but I feel like the weapons kind of come out like in terms of usability in a weird way. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. You unlock one in every single level, and you might end up getting your favorite weapon at 5 hours into the game and then only get to use it for an hour, right? Whereas you can use the hammer for all 6. That kind of frustrates me. I wish there was a way to unlock weapons, like get to a slot machine or something and pick, or even have it be random.
Yeah.
That's fine. Have it be random, but at least give me a chance to get a random weapon rather than the exact same one on every single playthrough in the exact same place. So that if I want to play, like Steve said, as with the mortar, I don't have to wait until hour 4.5 to play with one of my favorite weapons.
I would agree with that 100%. I mean, and we say you unlock weapons in every level. Like, that is true down to you literally unlock the calamity cannon, which is like it's like a rocket launcher equivalent. You unlock that in the second to last level. Like, you have that weapon for 25 minutes of the game, maybe. So it's like no one reasonably can actually have that in their build. Now, there is a New Game Plus. So if you're looking to do a full run with everything, I believe New Game Plus lets you keep your weapons and upgrades and stuff. So you could run through the whole thing again a second time. But I know for a lot of people, you know, we have plenty of crossover listeners between IndieQuest and Polykill. We're one and done beaters, all right? We get those credits and we move on to the next thing. So, I do wish that there was a little... let me pick my weapons in the same way that we pick the upgrade facilities.
Yes,
you know,
I
think
agree.
that would have been a nice change and add more variety to the gameplay.
And even if I'm a first-time player and all I have to go off is flavor text, then it's my own fault for picking the wrong thing. Or I could look up a quick video guide on each of the weapons and figure out what I think will suit my style, right? A game that I play a lot of, Monster Hunter, right? Not an indie game at all, but you have a choice to get all these weapons at the very beginning of the game. You can just go and demo all of them. Like, that's what I wish. And I think that SuperGiant probably at this point, although with Hades you unlock them in order to, but
you can
Hades
do that same thing kind of, right? You like, once you unlock them, obviously you can do a little like practice. And it shows you what each of the buttons do and everything. So maybe this is something they took in. Yeah,
right. The big difference with Hades is I can unlock all the weapons in 5 hours, the same amount of time as Bastion, but I'm going to play Hades for 60. So
that's true. Yeah.
Not 6. Like that's
yeah.
So that's probably the biggest nitpick for me. Even though I ended up using the bow, which I got very early, I wish that you could unlock a variety of weapons from the start. Complaining about a 13-year-old game gets us nowhere, but that is my biggest nitpick. In terms of the quest log, back when I played it originally, I would have easily put it on the main quest, and that was in, like I said, 2020. Now, if it didn't have the SuperGiant stamp, I don't know that I would put it on the quest log. Or I would put it on the quest log. Whoa. I don't know that I would put it on the main quest. I still think that because of everything involved, I would probably waver and put it on the main quest, just because of the way that it paved. If there is no Bastion, there is probably no Hades, and that is a sad, sad world to live in.
That's true.
I would probably put it on the main quest with that in mind, although I could see people thinking that it's not worthy of the main quest to put on the side quests, and I assume that either of you or both of you might feel that way. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think. I think the best review that I can pull from is Pam's, where she's a huge fan of the game, and she says it's amazing how they nailed their style, art, music, and voice acting in their very first game. Very emblematic of the fact that the thing that people remember about Bastion is everything around the gameplay itself. The gameplay is very serviceable, and everything else is incredible. And to be clear, a game can, I think, very much have somewhat simple or basic gameplay and still be incredible. I mean, I brought walking sims to the quest log where the gameplay is literally just hold forward. I'm not saying that it has to be super in-depth.
You make a good point, Steve. Bastion is similar to Planet of Lana for me.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
See, and I think that's 100% fair. I think that is Perfectly reasonable.
I put Planet of Lana on the main quest for those exact reasons.
Yeah, the presentation, right?
Yes.
Like just the package, the gameplay is like a secondary thought. Like just how I love Planet of Lana, I would put it on the main quest for the same exact reason that you did. So kind of a mini second opinion there, I guess. But yeah, yeah. So
dang, look at that. But yeah, so my experience playing the game now 3 times through is that, and here's something that'll surprise you. Okay, despite having an indie podcast where I sing the praises of indie games and being a man thickly coated in nostalgia, one of my like hottest takes back in the day even was that Bastion is just a fine game. Yeah. Mid is a little harsh, but like
fine and mid are similar words, but yes, go on.
In a world where I am consistently told that I am too positive about everything I play, people were surprised to see me give Bastion like a 7.5 out of 10. I think it is a fun game. I had no regrets playing through it again. I had no regrets playing through it twice to get the platinum. I liked it enough to get the platinum. But I will say that in replaying it, I did find the actual experience of going through it a little repetitive and a little monotonous and not particularly challenging, even though I think the game was trying to challenge me. And in playing through a run with all those idols and stuff, sort of like testing the game at its most difficult possible, I felt like I had to resort to strategies like I mentioned about like abusing damage over time, heals, because the actual combat couldn't quite hold the weight of that challenge in like a blow for blow kind of way. It kind of felt like getting to the last boss in like a Super Nintendo, like a Mortal Kombat or something, and just getting absolutely bodied by the AI that's reading your inputs. It's like the combat wasn't quite set up for that. Right. So I think Bastion does a lot to, like Pam says, to establish SuperGiant's style. And so much of it is great. The narration is great. I used to play Dota 2, okay? For 1,000 hours, I played Dota 2, and I played the entire time with the custom Bastion announcer pack that I purchased separately.
That's awesome.
So that frickin' Logan Cunningham could tell me that Bristleback was going bottom lane, all right? And I had no regrets. I loved it. But all that to say is I do think that Bastion comes up just a little bit short. For whatever reason, it just doesn't hold my interest through the entire playthrough. I am not like champing at the bit for yet another run through or another couple hours. I was kind of like, all right, I'm like content. I'm good. So if it was my podcast alone, side quest. It's a side quest game.
Okay. Josh, you have to break it.
I will. And so this one's hard for me because like this is the first time I ever played it, but like listening to both of you guys' arguments here, I'm actually leaning more towards Steve. Like I in my heart of hearts, I do think this is a side quest game in 2024. Like that's just me saying that straight up. Like I was gonna go through the game again to see like we already kind of spoiled. There's 2 endings to this game. I was like, I'll play through it again, and then I started up the second playthrough, and I started going through the motions, and that's what I was doing. I was going through the motions. I was like, okay, I think I've kind of had my fill at this 6.5 hours or whatever it was of gameplay. Do I want to play anymore? Not really. I'm good. I think I have enough to have a conversation about this game, and I wasn't really feeling going back. It's because like Hades, like we keep going back to that. It's our games like that. Or like Death's Door, like there is a draw there. Like I'll play like 20 minutes and I'm like, all right, I got to play. And then like 3 hours will go by, like it's nothing. This game didn't really have that for me. I was playing it for the podcast and kind of I was curious about it because, it's one of those classic indies that everybody always talks about. And I think it's a beautiful game. I agree. The narration's great. The music's great. The package, like presentation wise, is leaps and bounds most people's first game, like that's true. But the gameplay is kind of repetitive and doesn't have too much to offer me besides, the one playthrough I had, just to be honest. So to me, it is a side quest. I think that that would be a very fair place to put it nowadays. That's my opinion.
To be completely clear, as I do for every episode, I write out my notes. And for my verdict, I have borderline. So as I mentioned,
I could tell you were conflicted. Right?
Yeah, I am. Really, the reason I feel that there is, at least some sort of bid towards main quest is because of what it established in indie gaming.
Yeah,
and I think that you can't take that away from it. But I also completely agree that the gameplay, which is what should be the most fun thing about this game, or at least way up there, does not push it forward, right? So you're loving the music, you're loving the narration, you're loving what you're looking at, but you're kind of sitting there with a controller in your hand when you'd rather just listen and look, right? I don't need my controller. I'll watch somebody else play it, honestly, because the gameplay itself it's fine, but it's not what you're here for. So
yeah, no, I pretty much spot on, and we have put other games on the main quest, I think, for exactly that reason, right? For sort of when we're on the borderline, putting the thumb on the scale a little bit and saying, this game was relevant, early indie that did something important that others followed in the footsteps of. And so I want to give it a little bit of a nudge for that. So I don't think anybody would be wrong to hear our sort of overall breakdown, both positive and critical, and think that it deserves to be a main quest. But it's a gut thing, man. Plus, I think I personally can't help but feel like I'm also sort of separately subdividing all of the SuperGiant games, which ones are main and side quests, and I'm pretty sure I know where Hades belongs, and it would be weird for me to have both these games in the same category.
Well, what's funny is so this is earlier in the show. We've probably only been doing the podcast for 3 months. We just threw Hades just willy-nilly onto the main quest during our Game of the Year discussion, and we didn't really have an in-depth conversation about it. We'll get there and actually have that conversation, but I just think that's funny.
Yeah, we're making good on that. Don't worry.
Spoiler for 1 year from now, Hades is a main quest game.
It's and spoilers for apparently 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that was our Game of the Year. We're like, oh yeah, it's our Game of the Year. Oh, Hades is great. Let's just throw it on. It's a main quest. Yeah, we'll put it on the quest log because we were still filling the show out, so it happens.
It's funny that you guys did that, but Tunic is still not on the quest log. Game of the Year, Tunic.
Well, it deserves to be. Somehow we'll have to bring Tunic back in a way. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll have to do the Animal World into the show topic discussion and just all play Tunic again or whatever. We can figure that out another day. But so I think we've come down on a verdict here. This Bastion from 2011 is a side quest game, which is still a great game. We still loved it. We just don't feel like it holds up as a main quest, right? That's what we decided that, right?
Yep, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering. I'm sorry, Pam. I'm sorry. This is probably gonna be your last episode that you listen to us. But
I would be interested to hear if Pam goes back to play Bastion again. I don't know how long it's been since she's played, but maybe she has exactly the same feelings as she ever has. But I would be interested to hear if it's been a few years, what she thinks.
I'm sure she'll just be happy to disagree with me.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, well, we're going to do a little bit. I think we'll do some light spoilers after the credits here. Probably only 5 minutes, honestly. There's not too much to spoil from this game. But before we do that, we'll do some plugs. You can find the show on Twitter at IndieQuestPod, or you can send us emails, IndieQuestPod@gmail.com. And there's one thing you can do at the top of every description of the podcast, kind of trying this out. There's a link you can click and leave us a text message on Buzzsprout, which is a new feature they added. If you guys want to try that out, we'll read them on the show. It's kind of a cool little thing. Nice new comment section ideas for podcasts is always cool. There's still a Spotify thing if you want to leave a comment there too. So lots of options to reach out to us. Steve, where can they find you on the internet?
Best places would be Twitch or Twitter. I'm Blink on both. That's Blink OOMM like mortar. Drachma, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Captain Drachma, and of course in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. And if you want to get into that Discord, head on over to Patreon, type in Polymedia into your little search bar there, and jump into the tier that gets into the Discord. Come and hang out. Josh, where can I find you?
You can find me at Frantic Society, and you can find a bevy of amazing shows over on polymedianetwork.com, field for nostalgia, video games, movies, and otherwise. So go check out our network if you haven't heard of it. You'll definitely find more awesome things if you like this show. So I think that's going to be it for our first rundown of SuperGiant games for Bastion. It was a side quest game, but a fantastic side quest game. We will reconvene with this series later on in the year when it feels natural to fit it in with Transistor, but we'll give you guys some time if you want to play along with us for that one for sure. So
yeah, I'll give you a heads up. I'm excited for that one in particular.
Yeah.
Of the games that I haven't played of theirs, I think Transistor is the one that I've most wanted to get around to. So that's maybe of all four, the one I'm most pumped for sure.
Awesome. So Seth, why don't you throw some parting words for the folks out there before we jump into our light spoiler talk here?
All I'm going to say is if you listen to us talk about Bastion and you don't have an opinion or aren't sure or haven't played it in years, go back and check it out because it is a fun experience with a lot of fun, cool things that were built upon for SuperGiant. SuperGiant being just this indie conglomerate at this point. It's cool to see where their origins were. So go check it out. And thanks for listening.
So here's a spoiler topic. Honestly, like the story isn't really that deep or crazy, but if you guys don't want to hear anything about the story, go ahead and turn off the podcast now. Come back after you beat it to listen to us discuss it a little bit. So which ending did you guys pick?
I picked the opposite of what I picked the first time. That I did remember because it is very specific. So as I think I normally do in almost all games, at least on my first playthrough, if there's somebody that I can save, even if they seem like an evil piece of shit, I save them. So on my first playthrough, I carried Zulf to the finish line. On this one, it actually felt... I sat there and thought, should I just pick him up again? Because I just felt... it's just weird. It does make you feel like, oh, this is a tough decision. I did leave him behind and walked on. And one of the coolest things about it, I didn't know that this would happen. I had no idea. But when you carry him, they don't the Ura don't attack, right? You just walk and they kind of all bow. And this time, if you don't carry him, they go apeshit on you. But they can't do anything to you with the battering ram thing. So you just kind of blow them all away. So what did you guys do?
I carried him to the end and picked that ending where, like, there's two choices, right? You can either save him or not, and then the other one is to, like, basically reset the timeline or just continue on, which, you know, I chose to save him, and then I chose to just continue on and not reset the timeline. I feel like the implications, the way the time travel story is, like, told, it kind of feels like you're just recycling that cycle of hate, like destruction again. Like the calamity will just happen again if you just reset it, and then you're just in this loop doing it over and over again. Might as well just be a roguelike game, right? You know?
They had the ideas even back then. Yeah, in both of my playthroughs, I saved him. I'm too big of a softie. I can't just leave him there. I'm kind of sympathetic. He's just in his feelings about how this whole situation went down. And then when I first played the game years and years ago, I chose the evacuation ending where I just continued on with the timeline and sort of like moved forward, dawn of a new day type of deal. This time I did obviously both because I had to for the platinum, but on my first like more natural playthrough, I opted to go the other direction and reset the timeline because I knew I hadn't done that in the past. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of like is what you would expect it to be. Just kicks it back to the beginning and you're like, okay. And then it plays the credits and a really good song.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of just like I like the thought of, this is a shared experience everybody has. I just don't like erasing that from people's memories because that's pretty much what ends up happening, right? Like, what I assume, I watched a YouTube video of the ending, just to be honest, but like, I like the idea of like we had this shared like very, life-threatening, horrible thing happen. We overcame that together. Let's stay together. I like that thought more than just like, let's just repeat this again. Oh, let's just destroy, go back before the calamity. If they had all their memories, it kind of leaves it vague. If they do, maybe, I don't know, but I don't know.
Yeah, we've been conditioned by a lot of media that generally, given the opportunity to go back and change the past, it's usually not the right call, right? Like, accepting your circumstances and finding a way to move forward is always the healthier of the two options. So it does feel like they're a little bit nudging you in that direction. Mm-hmm. Even, what's his name? Ruck is the name of the character, the narrator. Mm-hmm. Even he, who is the advocate for resetting it, is still a little sympathetic to being like, but I understand if you want to carry on. I'm going to let this be your call. Mm-hmm. And it's like, all right, I appreciate that.
So I guess my big question, I've played through this game twice. Is it like a story about genocide, basically? Like, is that what's going on here? Like they're trying to exterminate the Ura, basically? Like, is that what's... I don't really understand. Like, I guess I agree with Potomax that it confuses me a bit about what they're trying to get at, because clearly they don't succeed at that. So I don't really understand what the motive of Rux is. And maybe I just need to listen more closely to him, but I'm also playing the game, which is maybe a drawback of the narration style. While you're playing and focusing on playing the game, you're not listening as closely as you might be otherwise. So maybe I'm just completely wrong. There's not like a take, like there's not like an opinion. Like, what did you guys think about the story or what actually takes place here?
I didn't take it as an intentional genocide. Now, I might have missed stuff, and I definitely skipped through the story the second time. But I got the sense that it was sort of an unintentional genocide of the Ura, where in this attempt to create the Bastion, or the thing that caused the calamity in the end, essentially they inadvertently wiped out the mass majority of this population, and that is what the existing Ura, including Zulf, are sort of like
mad about,
upset about, right?
Yeah.
And there might have been like it was unintentional, but also, they strategically chose to be doing their experiments in this part of town that is highly Ura populated. So there might have been a little bit of a reckless disregard for their life compared to others, but I didn't read it in as far as like conscious warfare.
So very much
same end, I guess, but yeah.
Nuclear testing. You're not trying to kill anybody, but if something happens to people, then you understand that as a necessary risk or something along those lines. Okay. Yeah.
Basically something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I always forget the narrator's name. You said it a second ago, but he said that he is the guy who created the Bastion, right? Like that was the whole thing, the whole thrust. Like he was kind of like trying to lead you on to like rebuild it. I don't feel like he had a malevolent force behind him. I feel like he was more like, hey, I'm just trying to like create this, utopian society with this new tech or whatever. But, it was it really just leaves it like open for interpretation. I feel like it's not super directly laid out, the entire story, unless I'm missing something.
I guess the strangest thing about it is you go through this world as you're playing, and it's like there's nobody alive. Until you realize that there's some Ura left, but who are we saving the world? Like, who are we creating this world for? That's what's weird. Unless there's just people you don't see. But the majority of people you come across, they're all ashed over, and they're dead. So it's strange. I don't know, but yeah.
Very good question. I'm not sure. I also have a little bit of a patchier read on it because, and I think I read that this is unique to the Vita version. But the Vita version has a bug where sometimes when you like go to like get one of the descriptions of like those objects, so you'll find an object out in the level and you can go talk to the different characters and they'll give you like a little bit of information on it.
Memento. Yep.
Yeah, Memento. The Vita version has this problem where there's a bug where sometimes when you go into one of those conversations, it will flash the subtitle for like a frame or two, and then it will just be blank and silent with no subtitles and no narration, just looking at the object. And if you continually click other objects, it will do that for every object. And the only way to fix it is to quit close the game and reopen it,
Jeez.
and then you'll be able to. But sometimes, it would have auto-saved or something, and so I would have just have missed that conversation that someone had about a particular object. So maybe there's more that I just didn't catch. Because that happened several times, like 4 or 5 times over the course of my playthrough.
I mean, I always feel like whenever you ask Rux, he's always pretty vague about it. And then when you ask Zia, she has a little bit more insight. But then also, Zia is a strange character too, because she's obviously an Ura, and she doesn't understand what happened to her people. So you rescue her, and then she's like good with going with you because she doesn't want to die in the wilds, obviously. But then she realizes what happened to the Ura, so then she runs away. But then you find her again, and then she comes back. And I'm probably just stupid and not philosophical enough to understand what all's going on with it. But the whole Zia thing confuses me too, because like, why does she choose to stay after she realizes what happened? Does she realize it's for the greater good? Like, what if she would have been eliminated with it? I don't know. It's a whole thing. So,
yeah. Very much so. I think that the turn halfway through where, Zulf kind of does his thing and destroys, quote unquote, half destroys the Bastion, right, and becomes the antagonist of the story. I think that was, set up and delivered very well. I just wish that it didn't have the wind taken out of it a little bit by immediately after that you realize, I just have to re-obtain the shards for every building again now. Like, you realize, I'm at the halfway point and I have to do the whole game I just did basically over again. I mean, new levels and stuff, but I really felt like, oof, there's more. They're really just do one more lap, baby. One more lap.
Yeah, it feels like very classic JRPG where, like you said, you're not repeating levels, but so many of those old games are like, well, we don't really feel like making another half of this game, and in this case, another half of the Bastion. So you're just going to rebuild the same Bastion you've already known, and we're going to improve a couple things, and that's it. So,
yeah. But
I mean, it is very much a intro to Supergiant, and I know for a fact that 4 games later, whatever you want to consider Hades, they built upon it heavily. So I cannot fault them for. I mean, honestly, for this being an indie studio's initial release, like,
ridiculous, right? and time travel to 2011. Compare Bastion to any other game that was coming out at that time. It's like they had been plucked from the future and brought back in time themselves to make a game. It does feel like it's really ahead of its time in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing about this game. It's just, like you said, it's they I don't know, they just came together and they made something special for the time. I mean, we can sit here, like, obviously it's on the side quest, we can sit here and nitpick it, but like, I think that what it started is what really matters. Like, because going forward, we're going to be playing 3-4 other banger games. Like, I have a feeling like this is such a nice launching pad that all you can do is just get even better. And even us here being on the borderline, like, oh, is it a main quest or a side quest? Like, that this game's awesome. So, but anyway, like I said, there's not much spoilers to talk about because like it's told to you in that way, and so it's kind of hard to absorb the information unless you go deep dive into like the full like written out storyline or something like that.
Yeah, this could very much be a, there are YouTubers who try to attempt to explain the stories of Souls games by piecing everything together, and it's not as intricate as that, of course, but there are a lot of what ifs and potentialities and opinions that could go into Bastion that you can take away. It's very much has a nice closed story, but you weigh in based on your own experiences, and that will impact how you feel the story goes. So, all in all, good, serviceable story, good, serviceable game, and a stepping stone into the Supergiant future. And I'm excited to go there with you, gentlemen.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the Vati video 6-hour breakdown of the Bastion story. Like, it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
The here's 50 things you didn't know about Bastion.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that's all we got to say. I think we've kind of like run out of things to say. So I will say thank you guys for sticking around, listening to the spoilers. Really, honestly, I don't feel like you spoiled much for yourself. So if you're still listening, kudos to you. I still think Bastion's a game worth checking out if you haven't. And as always, I appreciate you guys listening to the show, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.
Peace.